So the Iranians have made a pilgrimage to Moscow today to meet with President Putin. They're hoping that they're going to get some support from President Putin. And it was really interesting when I was thinking about it. I was thinking about the movie The Godfather. Like, you never wanted to be my friend. If you wanted to be my friend, the men who did this thing to your daughter would be suffering this very day. Right? I mean, now there's strings attached to any help that Putin brings along, but I don't think Putin's actually going to help. And I think he made commitments that weren't really commitments before. Now, remember, back in January, there was this treaty, and I was nervous about this at first. In fact, my first reporting on this, and then I corrected myself, was, they're about to create this treaty that's like North Korea. The North Korea treaty is a mutual military assistance package, and if North Korea is attacked, then Russia comes to its aid, and if Russia is attacked, North Korea comes to its aid. And it looked like that at first. It turned out that that's not what it was. When I actually got to read the text, when I first heard about it, I thought, they're doing that. Wasn't that? Now, at this point, I think that Russia was upset about not being able to get it back in January. And right now, I think the Iranians are pretty upset that they didn't do it because they would welcome that assistance right now. It's not going to happen. So here's what happened. Shortly after Russia's massive overnight bombing of Kyiv, the Russian dictator meets with Iran's foreign minister. The Russian dictator called the strikes on Iran, quote, unprovoked aggression that has no justification. He does know a thing about unprovoked aggression that has no justification, but that is not what happened here. It's kind of like when I'm dealing with my kids. If they did something else caused what the one did to the other, right? So, he hit me or she bit me, like when they were little, that kind of thing. And my first question would always be, well, what happened just before she did that to you? Right? What caused that? And in this case, well, you were building a nuclear bomb, or you were working toward enriching uranium far more than you needed to enrich the uranium. And yeah, okay. At any rate, let's look at this. Putin to Iran's foreign minister. I'm glad you're in Moscow today. I should read it like The Godfather, shouldn't I? I'm glad you're in Moscow today. This gives us an opportunity to discuss all the things, pressing issues, and to think together about how we might find a way out of the current situation. Right? How's my Godfather impression? Put that in the comments below. No public promises to help Iran from Putin so far, apart from thoughts and prayers. It's reported that the Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, passed a letter to Putin through his minister asking for help. Okay. Again, Russia has chosen the right side of history and international law. Really? That's what the Iranian foreign minister says. Listen to what he had to say here. This is carried in RT.
Aggressive actions by Israel and by the United States are illegitimate, and they violate international law and international norms. And currently we are protecting our sovereignty, our country, and our defense in this regard is legitimate.
There's long pauses because of the translator.
We also wanted to thank our Russian counterparts, our Russian friends, for condemning these aggressive actions.
Which is ironic.
Russia today has chosen the right side of history and international law.
No, not really.
And the Supreme Leader and Iranian President Pezeshkian asked me to convey their best greetings to you, and I hope that today we will have a chance to discuss all the matters related to this situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's where they are, but no, I don't think any help's on the way. Peskov was very ambiguous in what he was saying here. Peskov said that Russia's assistance to Iran will depend on what Tehran needs. It all depends on what Iran needs. If we have offered our mediation efforts, yeah, that $5 will get you a cup of coffee. We have stated our position that it's also a very important step, and it's a forum of support for the Iranian side. Going forward, everything will depend on what Iran needs at this moment. Okay. As I said, Russia will send thoughts and prayers. But nothing's actually going to happen here. And if you're Israeli and you've tried for the last however many years to play nice with the Russians, like not trying to provoke the Russians by not weighing in on the side of Ukraine, this is kind of like they're not going to support you. They're just not going to support you. So, okay. Meanwhile, Zelensky arrives in the UK for a visit. In London, the president will meet with King Charles III, Prime Minister Starmer, and the speakers of both houses of parliament. Now, I saw that after I saw this. I had to figure it out through Dmitry Medyev's ranting. The green tapeworm has crawled into England. Oh, I figured he was talking about Zelensky here. It crawled into England, demanding 0.25% of the Allies' GDP. At the same time, he can't even account for 30% of the money he's received for weapons. Well, this isn't proven, but if you say it, then it gets picked up by Scott Ritter and Doug McGregor and whoever else, and then it gets into the social media biosphere. How long will you tolerate parasites in your body, Europeans and Americans? Again, this is just Medvedev and yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, Medvedev was also saying nations are prepared to arm Iran with nuclear warheads after U.S. strikes. This was carried in the Jerusalem Post, and it comes from this tweet. Again, he just does these kind of tweets all the time that are just like, I don't know if he's sober some of the times when he's doing this. The enrichment. So he was talking about how what have the Americans accomplished with these nighttime attacks? Critical infrastructure of the nuclear fuel cycle appears to have been unaffected, has sustained only minor damage. That's patently not true. The enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. Well, continue means that it's been happening in the past. Did you mean to just pants yourself and say that you knew that this was actually going on before when it was all being denied? Okay, and then 3, this is the one I got Trump's goat, and I'll show you this in a moment. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. Well, Trump responded to that in a Truth Post here today. Did I hear former President Medvedev from Russia casually throwing around the N-word nuclear and saying that he and other countries would supply nuclear warheads to Iran? Did he really say that, or is it just a figment of my imagination? If he did say that, and if confirmed, please let me know immediately. The N-word should not be treated so casually. Okay, so far, that was a great tweet from President Trump, right? And then he goes, I guess that's why Putin's the boss. Oh, I'm just like, come on. What is it with Putin? What's the infatuation? Okay, at any rate, Mark Levin, he's a conservative figure. He's a very prominent figure in the conservative media. He's known as the Great One. That gives you some sense of how he's respected in conservative circles. He wrote, "Hey, dummy, maybe we arm Ukraine with nukes too. You scare nobody." Hey, like now Levin does not have any power to do this, but he speaks for a lot of the conservative, the really truly conservative wing of the Republican Party. The Reagan caucus says this: "Wish we had done the same thing with North Korea when we had the chance." Yeah, you know what? Keeping North Korea from getting a nuclear weapon would have radically changed the trajectory of what's going on in Asia. Okay, NATO members are now agreeing to an increased defense spending to 5%. U.S. officials say Trump will urge alliance leaders to revitalize industrial capabilities or capacities for minerals and weapons. Zelensky will attend. That's new that Zelensky will attend. He wasn't supposed to be attending the other day. Now, this is the article in the Kyiv Post about it. NATO members agree to increase defense spending to 5%. On Sunday, NATO members, in principle, agreed to meet the new goal. The deal called for at least 3.5% of national GDP to be spent on core military needs, while an additional 1.5% could be allocated for related expenditures, like things that are not military directly, but support military. Spain sought to block the measure, but ultimately dropped its opposition after the deal was reached to exempting Madrid. So they're free riding on the defense of NATO and this is kind of like, if you're upset when you hear that, and you're going, that's really not cool. This is how Trump was looking at NATO in general, free riding on the U.S. nuclear umbrella and everything else. And so I'm just trying to give you a perspective. I'm not saying that they're not carrying their weight or anything anymore, that the Europeans are stepping up. But and it was, I got to give the devil his due, Trump, who was calling for 2% by all nations a decade ago, and now here's where we are. And they've just crossed that 2% threshold. And that's good. Now, if they had 2% a decade ago and have kept doing it since, they would have far more provisions to meet the threat that is Russia right now. Western diplomats are holding their breath, mindful that Trump's ambivalence toward NATO and America's allies will loom over the aftermath of an uneventful summit. One Western diplomat put it in an interview with the Kyiv Post, even with a very short meeting plan, no news out of The Hague will mean good news for NATO. Like, if there's nothing like really weird or breaking, Seth Jones, a president of the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said a U.S. decision that a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia is not likely. A U.S. president that gets tired of negotiating and ends all U.S. support to the Ukrainians and walks away. And then the result of Russian advances on the battlefield, to me, that would be an example of something that would be much more likely to rattle the European capitals than a range of these summit issues. Like that's the kind of thing that we're trying, like, so if we have no news out of NATO, that's kind of an optimal scenario, because who knows what Trump could do. Now, if you thought I was just defending Trump, I'm not. I think that Trump had the right idea with, you have to increase spending to 2% before, but Trump has been very bad for NATO, and he doesn't want to be part really of NATO. He has his eye on what's going on with China in the Indo-Pacific. And I think he would rather just turn over all European responsibility to the Europeans in NATO. That's just my read. I could be wrong about that. Okay. Now, Merz had a shift after he met with Trump. This was when he came to the Oval Office about a month ago. Merz shifted his stance on debt and defense after Trump's February meeting with Zelensky. That led to a $500 billion defense increase in Germany. Merz is concerned about U.S.-NATO disengagement and Russia's military buildup, as well he should be. So the thing that the Europeans are doing is what they need to be doing for themselves. And then it's also the thing most calculated to keep Trump playing nice with NATO, because he sees NATO as these freeloaders, like the Spain example. Okay. Russia's bargaining hard to kill sanctions, according to Zelensky. And that's something that I think Trump's inclined to do, and that's shameful that he would be inclined to do that. Like, if there's no morality to this, and you're just trying to make money, I get that, but this is not something that you can just overlook, right? Moscow is using global connections to negotiate softer restrictions, Ukraine's president has warned. Okay, some other stories. Russia's going into serial production of the Orishnik missiles. They're trying to create more of them, and I think what they're going to try to do is create more of them and then use them. It's just a short step below what would be nuclear, so they wouldn't be charged with having used nuclear missiles on a non-nuclear nation, that isn't going to be able to defend themselves, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that would be a juicy target, that factory, for the Ukrainians. Meanwhile, Hungary and Slovakia block new EU sanctions against Russia. Budapest's justification for vetoing the sanctions is its desire to keep buying Russian oil. The foreign minister also pledged to block all EU aid for Ukraine. They keep doing this and keep doing this and keep doing this. They're the poorest country in Europe, and they keep blocking this in order to get a handout. Like, that's what they're trying to do. We'll stop you here, but if you give us this, we'll come along. And it's really tragic to see. Now, this is the problem with having to have unanimity across everything that they do. Now, Ukraine, this title isn't quite right. Someone in Ukraine, a scientist in Ukraine, is calling on Poland and the Baltic states to jointly develop nuclear weapons. Again, if everything about the scenario with Russia and Ukraine is telling the world the safe course is to have your own nuclear weapon, Because we have full moral grounds, says Volodymyr Horbalin, the patriarch of Ukraine's missile program, in an interview with the BBC. The coalition of neighboring countries could develop a nuclear arsenal and extend a security zone across all of Europe, the scientist believes. He suggests this could involve fourth-generation nuclear weapons instead of some kind of strategic missile. It could be, for example, a bomb similar to the American B-61 thermonuclear warhead. So that's where you're going to go. If the world doesn't check aggression by a state that has nuclear weapons that would have been checked if they didn't have the nuclear weapons, this is where people have to go to defend themselves. It's like the woman that has a gun in her purse because a criminal has it. It's the same kind of phenomenon. Okay. Russian oil is now a military operation. For the first time, a Russian warship openly escorted tankers of the Shadow Fleet across the English Channel. So Mark Douglas is an analyst in the field of maritime situational awareness. He confirmed the first case of Russian warships escorting sanctioned tankers in European waters. They kept getting stopped by Estonia and Finland and other countries. Yeah, so the Russian Navy openly protects the Shadow Fleet with military force now. The Selva tanker transmitted AIS signals like a Panamanian vessel, but after publication of this material, it turned out that the tanker seems to have changed its flag and is now sailed under the flag of Palau. According to Douglas, it's now becoming clear that after inspections by Estonia and increased control by EU countries, Russia has indeed switched to open protection of the Shadow Fleet by military forces. Finland's defense minister has previously warned of such escorts, calling them unprecedented. And here is the ship that we're talking about. It looks like a piece of work. And here's where it is 4 minutes ago, and it had come through the English Channel, and this is where it is now. Okay, last little bit by Darth Putin. I took time out from my illegal, unprovoked war to condemn an illegal, unprovoked war, says Putin. All right, my friends, thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.